to drive your career, not just ride along? You're in the right place. Welcome to the Power of Owning Your Career podcast. I'm Simone E. Morris, your host and career strategist, here to give you the roadmap. Each week, we're cutting through the noise with strategies, stories, and insights to get you back in control. Your career clarity starts right here. Welcome to this week's episode of the Power of Owning Your Career podcast. Today, you're hearing from me, your host, Simone E. Morris. And as I promised in season 14, you'd hear a lot more from me. You'd hear some expert interviews as well as leadership stories, the usual cadence that we use in the podcast. Now, today, here's what you can expect to hear. I want to talk to you a little bit about the driver's seat and what it means to be in the driver's seat. Reflect on season 14, the progress we have made thus far. And then I thought it would be cool to answer some questions, and I'll tell you who I got some help from to generate these questions that will hopefully assist you in your journey, in your pursuit of the driver's seat, and then talk about what's next. So let's go ahead and get started. I thought I would pull out the book, 52 Tips for Owning Your Career, because in it, I talk about how to know when you're in the driver's seat. And just a little backstory here. I started the podcast because for me, being hands-off in my career proved to be game-changing. And game-changing not in a positive way, but in a way that really cost me a number of years in my career. I was very hands-off and waiting for things to happen to me. So when I finally got to the point where I realized that my career is my responsibility, I began to act strategically, be intentional, and my outcomes were very different. So that's the rationale for me really being very intentional about helping others. I work with coaching clients and I help them to take ownership, to be very vested in their career outcomes. So here's what I have written. This is on page 33 of the 52 Tips for Owning Your Career book. I encourage you to go to the website 52tipsforowningyourcareer.com and get your copy of the book. But here's what I've written about the driver's seat. When you are in the driver's seat for your career, there is a sense of peace and knowingness that you were a ready, willing, and able participant. You feel fully vested in all decisions related to your career. You realize that at any given point, you're empowered to make decisions that are in your best interest. You understand that you can say no to opportunities that don't make sense for your career or that do not align with your personal career brand and goals. Those in the driver's seat have a plan for their careers, a willingness to do the work to achieve their goals. So in other words, you're not just talking the good talk. You're actually taking action to receive the results. And some of that action may not be fun and it could be difficult at times, but you're willing to do the work. Also, relationships, you have relationships in place that you can depend on that contribute to your successes. You also have a keen awareness that there is no gain in blaming others for their stalls. Let me pause there for a moment. Man, it can really feel good to let other people be at fault for you being stuck in your career or stalled and not getting the results that you seek. And don't get me wrong, there are people that are out there that aren't that kind and will do things that mess up your career. What I'm saying here, though, is that you're not going to have any gain in blaming them. You can recognize, you can notice what's happening and be well aware of your interactions with people who are working to derail your career. But what I want for you is to move past the blame game. So people in the driver's seat have that awareness that there's no gain in blaming others for their stalls. They pick themselves back up when they fall and they try again. And that means you continue to go after your dreams. You can experience hiccups along the way in your career that threaten you to really remain complacent, stuck, those things. But the key really the key here really is to move forward. People in the driver's seat invest time in healing and continued learning. I can't say enough about the successes of working with a mental health practitioner. That has been game changing for me, just to process and digest things that have happened to me in my career and to really reframe redirection. Also, continuing learning. When you think about things that we've talked about this season, like AI, we had a guest who talked about AI, and it's important for you to be vested in your learning. Now, I remember when I was in corporate, I went back and I got my master's degree, and I also did some certification around project management. But the key here really is to, even if your employer does not offer tuition reimbursement or there is a cap on the amount that you can use for professional development, this is where you really turn inward and you get resourceful and creative to have continual learning. Honestly, there's so much free learning out there now with things like Coursera. LinkedIn Learning has learning availability. There's a lot out there. The key is for you to make the time to continue learning, continue shoring up your skills. The more you pour in knowledge, the better the output that comes up, the better strategies that you can leverage in your career. Even when you're in meetings and you're contributing ideas, the fact that you're well versed and on the pulse of what's happening in your industry, your function, etc., you're able to show up more confidently. People in the driver's seat prioritize taking time out of their career for themselves. You know what the saying goes, you got to put your mask on first and get the energy and resources and nutrients before you can help others. So if you feel that you are operating, you're limping when you're operating, you really need to take some time to pour into yourself, because you can be pouring from an empty cup. And also, being able to celebrate your successes is a very good thing for being in the driver's seat. You take the pause to acknowledge your brilliance. You don't shy away thinking, I don't need to boast about how brilliant I am. Yeah, you do, because sometimes other people don't recognize your brilliance. So you taking the time to celebrate your success is an indicator to your mind that you are worthy of celebration. It is indeed a journey to arrive in the driver's seat. I want to encourage you to continue to be in the driver's seat as you continue to listen to this show and take nuggets forward and implement them in your career. As I said, this is season 14. I'm excited. We have around 211 episodes. Honestly, you can go through our catalog and find something for whatever career challenge you are experiencing. And even if you're not experiencing career challenges and you want to fine tune your skills, there is something for you. So I want to thank the guests that have been in the show for season 14. I've really appreciated interviewing them, and I get excited. I really get excited about that. So we started out the season talking about career pivots and really building a legacy with integrity. And I really enjoyed Dan Castle's episode. He started us out and he talked a bit about AI in his episode. So I know you will get a lot from checking out that episode. So look for the Navigating Career Pivots and Building a Legacy with Integrity. And then I spoke to Kira Deneen. She is a podcast guru and a genetics counselor and doing some really great things. And we talked about risk, how to embrace risk and the benefits of networking or relationship building in your career. Another good episode for you to jump into and get some insights from that. Then we had Matt Stevenson, who talked to us about his journey and founding his company Code to College, and how he started out with Goldman Sachs and how many great things he's done in his career. And the key from his point of view, was really talking about saying yes to opportunities. And I always think about the Shonda Rhimes book, Say Yes, or The Year of Yes, excuse me, how powerful it is to be able to move past your fear or hesitance and to try different things in your career because there's an opportunity to learn even more about yourself. We then went on to speak to Hector Patches, who talked to us about the power of branding, the power of that important headshot and marketing assets to really advance in your career. So, like I said, it's been a really terrific season 4 start. And I want to jump in here and share some nuggets with you. So, what I have done is I use AI to interview me. I said to AI, listen, I want to answer some questions for my audience on the podcast. What should I answer? What would be impactful? So I want to read you the question and then I'm going to answer the question. And by the way, I welcome you to drop me a line and ask me any questions that you have, or if you want to jump to a conversation about your career, you can always go to callwithsimone.com and select a networking chat, or I really should say go to careerbreakthroughcall.com because that's more career centric and we have a bit more time to really look at what challenges you may be experiencing and how I may be able to help you address the issues that you're experiencing in your career. That said, let me jump into the questions. And by the way, there are lots of AI tools out there. I have used Gemini, I've used Claude.ai, ChatGPT, Perplexity. So there's a lot of AI tools out there that you can leverage to ask it to help you frame questions, to interview yourself. So here's an example. Throughout your career journey, what's been the most difficult decision you've had to make, and how did embracing ownership of that decision ultimately transform your professional path? The thing that comes to mind, well, actually, there's 2 things that come to mind, but I'll go with the second thing that came to mind. So, the second thing that came to mind was my decision to leave corporate America. I have always been taught to have a job, to keep the job, to keep getting paid, keep the job security. So when it came time for me to leave corporate America in 2013, that was the most difficult decision I've ever had to make in my career because it was really going against the grain, going against what I had been taught for such a long time. But I knew that my career is my responsibility. And so at the end of the day, I have to answer to myself. I have to be happy with myself. So I decided that I needed to have some self-talk with Simone so that I could pause the stories or the doubts that I was sprinkling in my mind about not to make this decision. So I basically had a conversation with myself and said, what is the worst that could happen? And what will you do if the worst happens? So when I left corporate America in 2013, I ended up taking 2 years off to really do some soul searching. I actually intended to go back into corporate America, but life unfolded in a way that said, there's a different direction for you. So I had my daughter, and because I wanted more flexibility and I was frustrated that I wasn't able to switch functions. I was in IT for most of my career, information technology, and I wanted to move to human resources. And there weren't a lot of doors that were opening for me. So, you know, the saying that goes, create your own table and invite people to come to your table. That's what I did with my business. So I started my business in 2015. So, going back to the question, how did I embrace ownership of that decision? I had to have people around me that believed in me when I didn't even believe in myself. And when I say not believe in myself, I mean from a entrepreneurship perspective, because it was such a different path for me. I was always nervous and scared about not having a steady paycheck, and could I really do this? Now it's 10 years later and I'm in a different place, but in the beginning it was really, really scary. So what's the moral of the story, or the question there is that you will have pivotal moments in your career where you're going to have to go inward to make a decision. You're going to have to listen to your own voice. And that's what I did. I listened to my voice. I trusted that I was resilient and resourceful, because the bottom line for me was, if I didn't make it as an entrepreneur, I'm going to have to find a job. So when I look at the two, I realized that I could afford myself the time to explore the entrepreneurial path. Kudos to Stephen. He really encouraged me to go down the entrepreneurial path when I just, was not feeling like I could, but he encouraged me and stood by my side with that. So I'm always thankful for him encouraging me that I've got this. So that was question one. Question two. Many of your listeners struggle with imposter syndrome and self-doubt. Can you share a time when you faced similar feelings, and what specific practices helped you overcome them to step confidently into leadership? Ooh, imposter syndrome. I'm seeing a lot about that on LinkedIn, particularly posts that are busting the myth of imposter syndrome, and that the reason people have this imposter syndrome is that somebody put the idea in your head that you're not good enough. So in terms of really practices that overcome feelings of being an imposter, is to remind yourself of your brilliance or your opportunity to be brilliant. Opportunity to be brilliant. So really that self-talk has been game changing. And also when I talked about being in the driver's seat, I talked about mental health support. And I will say that having a therapist who understands you and you can be vulnerable and authentic, which I am very fortunate that I have a therapist that I can be vulnerable and authentic and safe with, to say, when I'm feeling less than, that has really helped me to show up even stronger and to realize that vulnerability is a part of leadership. So if I don't know something, I'm the type of person that's going to go and learn it to be better at it, and also to reach out to people to help me get stronger in my skill set. So I acknowledge that there are times when, I don't feel good enough. And it's usually when there's a lot of smart people where I'm like, oh, I don't know enough, and when I think about things like AI, that's a perfect example of feeling like an imposter, because it's fast and furious. And if you're not engaged in that, you can feel less than. So when I don't have enough information, I can go to a place of I'm spinning my wheels, and the output is not good. So if I pause to say, what's happening here? What's happening here? I go to the place of Adam Grant of the notice and wonder concept, and I notice what's happening with me, what's happening with Simone. I answer that, and then I start to ask myself questions. Well, what do we need to do here to turn this around? How do we need to show up? What's true? My therapist always says to me, here's this data point. And then she says, at the same time, which is a point to contrast the point, which could be a negative point that I've created. At the same time, you are. So I want you to think about things like that to help you step confidently into your leadership. Know that everyone has some challenge. Everyone starts someplace. So everybody doesn't start out as an expert. It may seem like that because of the branding and the packaging, but everyone doesn't start out as an expert. You learn, and as Malcolm Gladwell says, you've got to have those 10,000 hours to help you get better. The next thing is that the next question, let me move to the next question. We often talk about success, but what's one significant failure that taught you something irreplaceable about owning your career, and how has that lesson shaped your approach to mentoring others? Powerful. Let me separate the question. When I think about my most significant failure, I go back to my time in corporate America when I was leading a project in Canada and the project was not going well. And for anybody who is leading projects, you know that the project manager is ultimately responsible. Even if you're not doing the work, you are the leader in charge, you are responsible. Things were not going great. And I just was doing a number with my self-talk just about, I can't fail here. This looks bad. You're making the company look bad. And I was delivering a project in Canada, and my home base was in the United States. And I just kept thinking about the optics of how would it look if this project doesn't go through. And I remember having this leader call me up and say, Simone, what's going on with this project? And I was like, it just very authentic about what was going on. And then I remember he said to me, sort of to the effect of, what are you going to do about it? And I didn't realize I had the authority to make a bold decision. And the bold decision for me at the time was shut the project down without completing the project, which I, in my mind, equated to failure. But failure was, once I got the opportunity to reframe failure was letting the project just sink, just go to the depths of, just really fail. Failure was not me realizing that we need to pause the brakes here. This is not going well, and to have a strategy and to think about and present it with a recommendation of, here's why I believe this project should be shut down. And it really taught me something about my strength, and that I could own my perspective about failure. I could own that I am authorized to make decisions. I am authorized to listen to my voice and to present my truth and my recommendation. And organizations have a responsibility to listen to their leaders and what they present and what they recommend. And in my case, I was listened to and the project was shut down. And I never forgot that. It was such a pivotal moment in my career that it stays with me today. That listen to your voice, Simone, because sometimes other people's voices are stronger than your voice, and your voice can be drowned out, and then you go along to get along. And sometimes I equate that to being a passenger in your career. So it's really important to listen to your voice. And when I talk to other people, I do a lot of coaching, a lot of career coaching. So I'm always encouraging my clients to really be authentic and help them with strategies so they can show up authentically, and also how to eradicate the doubt, the self-doubt that continues to plague us in our careers. From a mentoring perspective, I've been interviewed, been on panels, written articles, and I share my thought leadership in that way to help others. This podcast for me is a way to mentor others, to invite guests on to really talk about careers and how to help people be in the driver's seat for their careers, how to own their careers. That's made me very happy, and that will be a part of my legacy. Next question. In building Simone Morris Enterprises, what unexpected challenge forced you to completely rethink your strategy? And what would you tell someone facing a similar pivotal moment in their career journey? Well, my company is 10 years old, and the pandemic, think back to March 2020, that pandemic was one of those threats that became a reality and was really a hard hit to my business. And it forced me to completely rethink strategies around the business, rethink how I thought about capital and pouring money into the business. For example, I had never thought about grants as a funding strategy, a way to get capital into my business. I really was using my personal belief system about not borrowing money, just using the money I made. And as a result of that decision, it limited my ability to scale in the way I wanted to scale in my business. And now here we are at a different juncture where a lot of my work is around creating an inclusive workplace. And we have an administration that seems to be anti-inclusion, anti-diversity, equity, and inclusion. So I would say make sure that you have people around you that are advising you well. Be willing to take a risk, be willing to listen to yourself, and to really get educated These are strategies that can help you to soar in your career. And if you have entrepreneurial pursuits, to soar in the entrepreneurial space as well. Last question. If you could go back and give your younger self just one piece of career advice that you've never shared publicly on the podcast before, what would it be and why? Well, when I think about my younger self, I think about my daughter. And I have a 9-year-old daughter, and I look at her and she seems like my younger self, but of course she's a different person. But I always think about what advice would I give to her. And it's really about confidence, really about being confident in yourself and building your confidence. Once you build your confidence and belief in yourself, then your actions can really help you to thrive in your career, to be more strategic in your action. I go back to the place, just a really pivotal moment in my career when I applied to work at Macy's, not to work, to be in the Macy's leadership development program, and I didn't get in. I didn't have anybody telling me to still go for it. I didn't have anybody telling me how to reframe failure. I just felt like a big failure. I felt like my college degree was wasted, and I ended up going down a completely different path. I wonder what would have happened if I stuck with the messiness and stayed with it and believed in myself and said, no, I am going to be a buyer one day. I am going to apply to other places to get into their leadership department leadership development programs. Macy's is only one data point. I often tell my clients about 360 feedback reports that the data point that they get stuck on, this one comment that just makes you feel terrible about yourself and your capabilities, it doesn't define who you are, and it's one data point, and you can still take action beyond that. That is something critical that I wish that the younger Simone knew, that one disappointment isn't the end of the story. If you really want to do something, you take that in and you reach out and you gain more feedback on what was the thing that made you not a candidate. And by the way, it didn't even occur to me to apply again. I just was devastated and just went inward and went on a completely different path. So I would say, believe in yourself, be confident, have people around you that are going to lift you up when you can't lift yourself up. And by the way, you need to be vulnerable about what's going on. I'm not sure I told anyone because I felt like a failure. I had a college degree and I had done an internship at Macy's. And so I just knew I was going to get in, and I did not get in. And so I don't know how vocal I was about that. And back then, I don't think LinkedIn was around, and I don't even know if I would have said anything because my confidence wasn't where it needed to be at that time. So shore up on confidence. That's going to really help you in your career, because when you're confident, you can ask for what you deserve. You can show up, whether you want to be on a project, whether you want to get a promotion, or you want to have more an increase in your salary. When you're confident, you'll do your homework and you'll show up in a confident way for these conversations and these pivotal moments in your career. Remember, Simone is rooting for you to be in the driver's seat. Your career is your responsibility. If you want to learn more about the book and support me by getting your copy of the book, 52 Tips for Owning Your Career, you can go to 52tipsforowningyourcareer.com. We also have The Power of Owning Your Career. I'm working on a course for you, and we'll share more about that when it becomes available. But really excited about what's happening now, and it's a pivotal time. Lots of people are losing their jobs or they're restructuring in organizations. So remember, your career is your responsibility, and you deserve to own your career, own those career outcomes so that you're ready for what comes your way. I'm here. If you want to talk to me about your career, you can go to careerbreakthroughcall.com. I am ready and willing to have a conversation with you about that. So it's been my pleasure to have a real talk with you this week. I'm enjoying season 14. I hope you are enjoying season 14 and all the 211 episodes that we have on the podcast. And I look forward to the next episode. Be sure to join us and have a great week. Own your career this week. And by the way, you can share this episode and also tag me on LinkedIn. I'm mostly on LinkedIn, but we also show up on Facebook and Instagram, and just excited to hear from you about how you're owning your career. Take care, everybody, and have a great week. That's it for today's empowering episode. I'm Simone E. Morris, and I want you to remember that you are indeed the architect of your career. Share this episode if it sparked something in you. Subscribe wherever you listen, and find more resources at SimoneMorrisEnterprises.org. Keep practicing career ownership, and I'll be right here with you next week for more transformation.